Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
What have we got? Almost 10 minutes before 9 is the time. Let's stay with the migrant crisis, as it's called. Peter in Wimbledon. How is a crisis to be solved? Good morning.
Very good morning to you, Nick. I don't think it can be solved by any measures we have on the table at the moment. I do feel sorry for all those poor, naive and ill-informed people who fell for the lies of people like Farage and co. Because leaving EU was never going to solve this problem.
Okay. I mean, I do sense that we've had that argument so many times about Brexit, and it has sort of been, dealt with now. I wonder if, unless you're going to say, oh, God forbid, we rejoin the European Union, all this problem will go away, which I would point to you that we've had this problem for decades. All governments accept that, Peter. I don't quite see where we're going with this argument.
Well, the way I'm going with this argument, this leaving EU actually made it worse. That's the point of my argument, and you can see it by figures that people we are leaving the European Union, Nick, we are no longer part of the Dublin Agreement, which means we can't deport those people back to France and other countries. Many of your listeners.
But that I can't even believe. And honestly, I really enjoy speaking. Just lastly, Peter, the problem was there when Britain was within the European Union as well. There were many hundreds of people making the crossing then. You must recall that. And indeed, some of those tragic pictures of people drowning was again at the time when people were trying to get into southern Europe to get, one would assume, to northern Europe to try and get across the Channel. So it was happening then, Peter.
Well, absolutely, Dick. But what I'm saying to you is that the conmen and liars Brexiteers have told British people that leaving EU, which will mean we will leave European Court of Human Rights, which isn't the case. And I've heard it many, many times on your station that people, deluded ones, would call.
I honestly, I just think enough. Okay, I always enjoy speaking with you. Let's stop saying that other people are deluded or whatever. It's just there is enough anger and tension and fear in the airwaves at the moment as it is over COVID and everything else. Politicians, they put themselves up to be told that they're deluded or whatever. That's fine. But just writing off vast tracts of people in this country, it honestly, it's not going to move us forward, Peter. Have a safe day. I look forward to you speaking again. Can we all just reflect at times on the language? Whichever way they voted, we're all in it now, rightly or wrongly. That's it. And probably the bigger battle to confront at the moment is trying to stay alive with COVID. Peter, be well. Should we talk about racing driving? It might be a little bit easier. Yomi is in Erith. Christian Horner's comments. What did you take from them? Good morning.
Good morning. In itself, what Christian said, on the face of it, it wasn't racist, right? It wasn't racist. But it was the implication, what he implied by saying Lewis put his will in there. Lewis should know better than
the stewards seem to have agreed, Yomi.
Sorry?
The stewards seem to have agreed.
A racing incident, because...
hold on. No, it's not a... Were it a racing incident, Sir Lewis would not have had to serve a 10-second penalty.
Do you know why in my opinion, right?
Well, it doesn't matter. It's the steward's opinion that matters. And that's what happened. And that's the way they called it.
Did you listen... Wait, Nick, did you listen to what Charles Leclerc said after the race, at the post-race interview?
I have not listened to Mr. Leclerc, no.
Exactly. Charles Leclerc was the driver right behind Lewis and Max, right? And what he said was that Max was overly aggressive.
Okay,
Lewis missed the apex.
No, I'm sorry, Yomi. It doesn't matter. That would be like one football player saying they shouldn't have had a red card. It's what the referee decides. It doesn't matter what other players say.
Hang on. I'm not saying that Lewis shouldn't have gotten the penalty or something. He missed the apex. What I am saying, right, is the tone which Christian took implied that Lewis intentionally did what he did. That was the tone. That was the way he made it sound.
But you wouldn't get a penalty if the stewards didn't agree lastly.
Hang on.
Well, you wouldn't.
We are not talking about the penalty. The penalty.
Well, we are, because the penalty came as a result of Lewis's driving.
We're talking about what Christian said.
No,
the result
you can't
of
divorce. No, sir, you cannot divorce the two. Horner is responding to what took place on the track. No, hold on. Horner is responding to what took place on the track, which in the steward's book was worthy of a 10-second penalty. So that does imply guilt on Hamilton's...
We got the penalty, right?
Yeah,
we are not talking about the penalty. We are talking about what Christian said.
No, OK, we're going round. We're going round and round and round. We're going around the 3-mile Silverstone track here, and we're not going to come to an end. Yomi, I'm grateful, but please just realise, if guilt is attributed anyway, you have to attribute guilt, or ascribe guilt, to the bloke who did the penalty. Obviously, because you don't get a penalty if they thought it was absolutely fine, they wouldn't have got the penalty. We're going around in circles. Have a safe day. 6 to 9 the time. Jeremy in Teddington, you're on the radio, Jeremy. You've worked in Formula One, is that right? Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Nick. Yes, on the marketing side. So,
right, okay.
I've worked for a few teams.
Okay.
I agree with you. I think the incident was a racing incident. I think it's 50-50, but as you say, that's academic because the stewards gave a penalty. I do feel that there's just a huge amount of overreaction generally about this incident. If you think back to 1990, Ayrton Senna took Prost off on purpose in order to win the championship. In a move where he literally aimed his car at Prost and took him off. And the incident that happened this weekend was not that. Right. You know, this was a wheel-to-wheel racing incident, and I think it's important for everyone to keep it in perspective. Unfortunately, I think Formula One has got its knickers in a bit of a twist because the way that they are trying to write the rules means that some accountability needs to be given to a driver in any incident.
Lastly, was Horner justified? Sorry, was Mr. Horner justified in saying what Mr. Horner said in your book, Jeremy?
Absolutely. I don't agree with him, but I think he was absolutely justified. I don't think there was any racial intent whatsoever, and I wish we could have these debates about what happens on track without having to kind of veer into racial or politicisation, I think.
Grateful for your input, Jeremy. Have yourself a good day. That's a very exciting job you're working. Good luck with it. We'll try to return to this conversation. But let's get to something we looked at in the first hour. Women will be urged to report street harassment they might not be aware is a crime as part of a national publicity campaign to be launched by the government. More details on that for Safeguarding Minister and Conservative MP Victoria Atkins. OK, tell us more about this campaign, exactly what it means. Good morning.
Good morning, Nick, and thank you so much for asking about this really important strategy. It's a radical strategy, really to tackle those crimes that disproportionately affect women and girls. We've already passed the landmark Domestic Abuse Act, which will protect people at home, and this is about other behaviours, other crimes that really affect women and girls. And we've looked across government to make sure that we've got action on the transport network, for example, public transport. We know that can be an issue with people behaving criminally against women on trains and buses, but we're also wanting to ensure that people understand that they don't have to put up with these behaviours through the national campaign, as you've said. We're appointing a national policing lead to drive change across the country in terms of the policing of these offences. And we're also setting up a What Works fund to ensure that there's a detailed research into what will stop perpetrators, because we want to get the message out that this sort of behaviour is simply not acceptable. Indeed, it can be criminal, and that women and girls should not have to put up with this when they're walking around our streets or enjoying their lives.
You won't be surprised that for some newspapers the headline is whether wolf whistling or cat calling is to be made a crime. What is the truth in that, Minister?
We're listening very closely to views on street harassment. We know from the public survey that we ran this year, we ran the first ever public survey on violence against women and girls in order to shape our government strategy. And street harassment was a very, very common theme.
Yes, my question was, will catcalling and wolf whistling be made a crime?
It's a really, really complicated policy area. We know that there are some behaviours that are already criminal offences and people don't know about it. That's why we're running the comms campaign. But in terms of the range of behaviours that can be covered by that term, we do have to have a debate about where we think the line should be drawn in terms of criminalisation. So that's why we're not rushing into legislating. We are very much looking at what we can do to better empower women and girls to report existing offences, improve police response.
Right. So I characterise the answer is you don't know yet as regards wolf whistling and catcalling.
In fairness, Nick, I see this as very much the beginning of this next decade's work on tackling these crimes. Let me give you a little example. During the survey, remember the public emailed me saying, well, look, could we have a map where you just drop a pin and say, look, this is where I feel unsafe, and give me the reasons why. So we are doing exactly that. Next month, we'll be launching an online map to help people just drop a pin so they can tell us whether they feel unsafe, perhaps because the lighting's not great or because of others. We want to gather this information, do it in a really methodical way so that when we are considering options such as legislation, we're doing it in the most effective way possible.
Okay. While I have the benefit of you on the line, just a couple of other matters. Can you give us the definitive line on what you should do if you are pinged by the NH app? And indeed, do you have the app on at the moment, Minister?
Please, you must self-isolate, because we know that people who have been in close contact with someone else who has COVID are up to 5 times more likely to develop COVID themselves. We know it's frustrating, genuinely.
Can you help me with this? This isn't the case, but were I to be pinged the night before my wedding, what should I do?
Oh, gosh. I mean, the guidance is, please, you must stay at home. That is a terribly, terribly difficult scenario.
So under the Conservative government, you can go to the Euros semi-finals, you can go to the Euro final, you can go to the snooker, you can go to the cricket, you can go to all sorts of events, you can go night clubbing, but you can't go to your wedding.
Well, of course, now with the problem...
No, there's no... But that is the reality. You can go clubbing, but you can't get married. Do you think that works, Minister?
Nick, in fairness, not if you've been pinged. So the person going to the football match the night before would also not be permitted to go.
But something such as a wedding, mums, dads, relatives, grandparents, you're saying you can't go to your wedding?
I totally understand how the terrible impacts this virus has had on us all. Indeed, in my own constituency, I've had constituents contact me about funerals. I mean, the toll of this virus has been absolutely horrendous. But this is why, if now we're able to isolate in the way that the guidance requires, by mid-August, we plan to remove the self-isolation requirements, and that's really critical for people who are double vaccinated. So we're trying to take this step by step. If you've been double vaxxed, and if we can, if the data allows us, then by mid-August, we want to remove that self-isolation scenario.
And why the month delay, Minister? Because, again, providing you haven't got COVID, you can go clubbing, but you've still got to wait until August the 16th. Why? Why another month, effectively?
We can all see what the figures are doing in terms of infection rates. Happily, at the moment, they're not being mirrored in quite the way that they were previously before the pandemic, before vaccination, in terms of hospitalisation. So we know that the vaccination is weakening the link between infection and hospitalisation. But we still have something like 3 million 18 to 30-year-olds who haven't had a single jab. So we've got to get jabs into arms so that we can build up the nation's immunity, so that we can take that step in mid-August, as I say, to ensure that people who've been double vaxxed don't have to self-isolate. That's what we want to get towards.
And lastly, acknowledging it's not in your remit, but you work in the Home Office, you're probably aware that another £54 million will be diverted from Westminster to France to help with the concerns over the migrant crossing. Is there any auditing of that? How will we know what that money is spent on? Are you aware?
So the Home Secretary secured a very significant agreement last night with her French counterpart. We had a previous agreement in November, and this further agreement was very much...
You're aware how much we sent in November, aren't you?
Yes, it was 20 or so million.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely right. 28 million pounds. Nobody's quite sure what that's achieved, but we do know now that the French Navy, or the French Border Force equivalent, help shepherd boats to the UK side of the waters. What are we spending these tens of millions of pounds on then?
So if I may, just on the November agreement, we know that 7,500 people were prevented from crossing the Channel. And this is why we're building on this work, not just with more police officers on French beaches, but also increased surveillance technology to try to stem the flow. And of course, this is what we're doing internationally. We are also working domestically to shape up our immigration system. So only last night, we passed the the most recent stage in the Nationality and Borders Bill to really fix some of the problems that are in the immigration system. So ensuring that people who arrive here legally through safe routes we are looking after, but the people who arrive here illegally, who are perhaps being trafficked across by people smuggling gangs, that is dealt with. And the message to people who are thinking, well, we can travel across France, travel across the EU, get to France and get into a boat. The message loud and clear from the government is no, you must not do this. This is, if you're in a safe country, if you want to claim asylum, if you're in a safe country, you should claim asylum there. And so it's a huge international effort. Of course, we know across the world, all developed economies are facing these pressures in terms of population movement, but we're working both internationally and domestically to stop this.
Grateful for your extended time this morning. Thank you, Safeguarding Minister Victoria Atkins, appearing here on LBC, where the 9 o'clock news, 4 after 9, is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, the UK and France have agreed to double the number of police patrolling French beaches.